And welcome to episode 199 of the Actual Astronomy Podcast. I'm Chris, and joining me is Shane. We are amateur astronomers, and we like to go out under the nighttime sky to look at the stars. I seem to have lost my notes all of a sudden. So, Shane, I was in an observing committee meeting yesterday, which is Saturday, and part of the discussion was on interesting projects or programs, and one of the members on the committee raised an interesting project from Deep Sky magazine circa 1987, Lucien Kemble's 50 to the pole objects. So, yeah, I think you actually went and took a look at that as well. Just curious what you thought of that little project.
Yeah, it's interesting. I didn't have time to read the article. It's actually been kind of a busy weekend for us. So I will read it. But yeah, what was kind of interesting is, Lucien Kemble, wrote that article, and I have his magazine that his article appeared in, because, he's passed, but his entire library of astronomical books and magazines were donated to the local Regina Center. And I just have them on loan right now. The magazines, the Deep Sky magazines.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah,
very cool. Yeah, so he'd written this article called 50 to the Pole in 1987, and in that he had a list, sort of I'm not sure what he was thinking when he made the list, though, because it's 25. He says it's 25 selected objects. There's 600 objects he was trying to observe in the area from 50 degrees to 90 degrees on the celestial sphere. And the reason for this is that, we live kind of north. And so he was kind of making a bit of a project for himself. And but in those 25 selected objects, he had 32 objects listed. So he kind of had grouped some of them together, I guess, like pairs of galaxies or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I was kind of interested to see what those were. He also listed another 10 Messier objects. So it kind of gives you like 42. So he talks about the 10 Messier objects, just like lists them. And then he goes on and describes these quote unquote 25 objects, which are really 32 objects. And then he also sort of mentions in passing Kemble's Cascade. So you got really like 43 independent objects listed there. And it's an interesting selection because much of it is very faint. It's sort of like and I maybe like in his description there, he talked about it being almost like a test for an 8-inch telescope under perfect skies. So a lot of sort of 14th and up to like 15th magnitude galaxies, which I don't know that I've ever seen a 15th magnitude galaxy through an 8-inch telescope, but that's sort of what he was working under. And anyway, he eventually got an 11-inch telescope and then had put out this list of these selected objects. But I thought it was interesting. Like, they're not like the best and the brightest objects to the pole. It's a list that we're going to work through as an observing committee, and then maybe publish on the RASC website or through some other means to kind of raise some interesting projects people might be able to undertake. I think a couple of the objects are in the challenge object list from the RASC, but most of them are unique objects and extremely challenging objects, I would imagine. So I've seen a few of them. And I know Bill, who's a frequent listener to the show, I think he's seen the majority of them with a 12.5-inch telescope. But be kind of interesting to kind of visit those. Need at least 8 inches of telescope, though, to see them. So maybe get Mike out going with his 12.5 or 12-inch should be okay. So kind of interesting to take a look at those. And in the article he wrote, kind of hit this neat passage about programs, and he said such a program is a challenge and a test of your observing skills and yields unexpected pleasant surprises, some frustration, and plenty of insight into the universe. And so he's talking about his 50 to the pole. Now, when I first heard about it, I was a little bit confused. I thought it was 50 objects from 50 degrees north of the pole to the pole. And I thought, that's pretty cool, because then it's like the 50-50 project. Kind but anyway, it's not exactly what it is.
Yeah. I like the write-up in the table of contents. So, it's 50 to the pole, and then there's a little description, and it says, what is the modern Canadian deep sky observer to do? Become hopelessly frustrated because he can't observe Sagittarius, Scorpius, and Centaurus in the dark, contrasty sky? Hell no. 54, 40, or fight. Or maybe that's 50 to the pole. And I thought that was a great description. I kind of chuckled over that.
Yeah, he was an interesting guy. I never knew him. Did you ever meet him? I think he passed away before you were a member of the Rask. So
yeah, he did. So I never met him. And I think I just missed it by a few years. And then he had an observatory located just outside of Regina, the city that you and I live in. Yeah. And he donated the building to the local club, which was moved to the club's dark sky observing location east of the city.
And now stores the lawnmower, I believe, if it's still.
It might, yeah. It was a roll-off roof observatory. And that would have been quite the feat to move it. And I wasn't around for that either.
Yeah, I saw the pictures when they moved it. I mean, that was after I joined. They moved it there. And and then they turned it into storage in true style of a club.
yeah, it would be. It's too bad it's not seeing more astronomical use, but it is what it is, and clubs do what they have to get by.
Yeah.
But yeah, looking at this list, certainly challenging. I think the faintest object on here. What is it? NGC 5484, an elliptical galaxy in Ursa Major at 15.5 magnitude.
Yeah, I think it's near M101, if it's the one I'm thinking of.
Okay,
it's hard. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and he has a little comment here, although I think there's a typo. So he says NGC 5484, 5485, and 5486. The notes an especially satisfying group of galaxies. NGC 5486, which I think should be 5484, is extremely faint and listed at magnitude 15.5.
Yeah. Wow. But I think it's a great project for people with medium and larger Dobbs. One thing that people and possible with people using 8-inch Dobbs under really dark skies, which many of our listeners have, and then we do have lots of listeners with larger aperture instruments. So anyway, so here's a list for those individuals, and I plan to try to work through it as best I can. If I can maybe convince Mike to do that. I was going to give him a call last night, but it got late. But anyway, I'll get in touch with him soon and kind of start to put some of these on his radar, and hopefully we can go out this spring, because the one of the neat things about this is it's 25 fields, I think, is what you're looking at, and there's a handful of stars and a couple other objects, and then he did mention some Messiers before he starts into that list. So I think it would be just kind of to take the article sort of in its entirety, and then kind of look at everything he mentions in that whole article, since he does mention them all one way or another. So anyway, cool.
Yeah, it's super cool. I'll tweet out. I'll just take a picture of the list and I'll tweet it out so people can see what's on there. Certainly, you need to be in the north to see this. And if you are, what is pretty cool, like a lot of these objects are, Ursa Major, Ursa Minor, Draco, Cassiopeia. Like it's constellations that are in the sky 12 months of the year for us. So, you don't have to wait for a lot of these objects. They're there every night.
Yeah, it is cool. And I know we have a lot of listeners in the UK. And so here's a list for you. You don't have to struggle with trying to see stuff that it's really in the south, or when it's too bright and astronomical twilight doesn't end for you either, for a period of time in end of May to beginning of July. So I mean, this is a good list for all of us who do live sort of north of the 49th parallel, so pretty cool.
Yeah, and I don't want to just focus on like the 15th magnitude stuff on this list, because there's a lot of other stuff here too. Like there's some stuff as bright as 6.8 magnitude. There's a handful of single digit magnitudes, from 6.8 up to like 9 point something. And then, all the way from 10.6 to that 15.5. So it kind of covers a whole bunch of magnitudes. which is really cool because in a way, like what I like about double stars is, it tests the observer's eye and the observer's equipment. You push it to see, if you can split real challenging doubles. And this is an interesting deep sky list because it will challenge you all along the way with different magnitudes, and you can sort of see what your limiting magnitude is for some of these objects.
Yeah, I think it's super cool. And then as well, you think about it, and in a way, it's a more approachable challenge than some of the other more challenging lists. Like I know, like the Caldwell list that Patrick Moore had come up with, which also contains a lot of really interesting objects. I think I've observed all those visible from my latitude, and even traveled and saw a few. But unlike that list, where I think most of the objects you can see with reasonable aperture, this one as well you can see with reasonable aperture. But instead of having to go south to see that whole list, this list is going to challenge you by making you take your reasonable aperture out to darker and darker skies, right? Like you said, you can start probably like some of our correspondents, they have, as they call them, back gardens in the UK, from what I understand, and they can go out and look at those single digit objects, like 6th magnitude, 8th magnitude, 9th magnitude from their gardens, and then they're going to run out. But instead of having to go on a plane or try to go somewhere fancy, they can just like progressively go to darker and darker skies, like drive 20 minutes out of their city or town and 40 minutes, and go to a dark sky site. I know there's lots of awesome, and I've seen videos of them. That's how I know that they look like great star parties that they have in the summer there, and even in the off season. They should be able to go and observe during and at those dark sky parties, and maybe be able to get them all. It could be a good list for somebody at a dark sky party that had a good view to the north, like in April or October or something.
Oh yeah, for sure. I think this is pretty cool. I don't really have the aperture for it, but I would love to look through, Mike's telescope or others, just to see what some of these objects look like.
Yeah, and again, it's not 100 objects; it's 25 fields, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And so, even if you wanted to sketch them all, like most of us who sketch, probably 5 objects would be a lot to sketch in a night. But, if you had like a really good week of weather, and had 5 really good nights, and you were committed to spending like, for me anyway, it would probably take me 3.5 to 4 hours to do 5 sketches. And lots of people sketch much faster. You could probably get it done in a new moon period, like that 2-week period. And over the course of a season, like you said, because they're all fairly high in the north, you'd stand a fairly good shot at getting them all, without having to go too crazy. Even if you only sketched 1 or 2 a night, you'd need however many nights to do that. 10 nights over the course of a season. Here anyway is not unusual, and I know in other places they might not get as many nights, but over the course of a good summer, should be able to get 10 good nights, or even a couple seasons or whatever. But because they're always up there, being able to get 25 fields in a year would be very, very easy to do.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Again, it makes me really think about getting like an 8-inch telescope and seeing if I could pull that one off. I feel like might be a stretch for some of those, but again, like you could get through most of it. I think probably an 8-inch, even in a dark sky, is going to be challenged by a few of those. But you go to the big star parties, then you're like, lots of people with 16-inch telescopes. It's going to make short work of some of those. So you could probably get them all without having to do too much of an upgrade. So yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. All right. Let's see. Sound like you left and rejoined or something. So I got a big ding. So.
Oh, no, that's weird.
Yeah, sorry about that, folks. Not really sure what happened there. So yeah, apologize for that sound. So we had a couple pieces of correspondence from Ethan and Joseph, and they kind of inspired this because they're working on some very interesting projects.
Yeah. We kind of teased Ethan's project on the previous episode, and I'm fascinated about this one for a couple of reasons. Citizen science and the fact that it's exoplanet related.
Yeah. So Ethan had sent in a Patreon donation. We really appreciate that. We really appreciate what he sent in, and I don't want to diminish that. And like I said, we always do try to write emails of thanks to everybody, whether they're just sending a Patreon donation or sending us an email or what have you. We do really appreciate that. But when he replied, he came back with a really interesting take on his entry into amateur astronomy. And so he's a newcomer, and I always want to call it like the sport of amateur astronomy. But he's a newcomer to amateur astronomy. And, it just shows that people are coming into this coming down different paths, like different avenues, and having a different take, because we're all different people. And so he's going the route of one of these new robotic telescopes, and as well I think he's trying to learn the sky. Had made the recommendation to get Night Watch. I think he had gotten it or was going to pick it up. So but he's gone out and bought one of these robotic telescopes. So Shane, can I just start reading this, and maybe we can
go for it
as we go through, so people can know where he's coming from a little bit. So Ethan writes, "Hi, Chris and Shane. It's good to hear from you and connect. Thanks for the message." He says, "I'm a new listener from California. I've always been a big space and science nerd, but now I'm just getting started on my journey into astronomy and astrophotography. I've been looking for a hobby where I'd learn new things, meet new people with common interest, and also contribute to science in some way. Astronomy and astrophotography seem to check all those boxes. To that end, I purchased a Unistellar eQuinox, it's eQuinox, so lowercase e, capital Q, Unistellar eQuinox telescope recently, and just had my first light this week. I mainly chose Unistellar because it seemed to have the lowest barrier to entry, at least technically. I was excited to be able to start viewing things right away, as well as engaging with the community of other Unistellar owners. I'm especially excited to start contributing to their citizen science initiatives, helping to track and monitor near-Earth objects, or NEOs, as we often will abbreviate them. In parallel, your podcast has been a great introduction to both basic and more advanced concepts that I hope to be able to understand one day. Okay, hopefully we can make things a little bit more approachable. Certainly if we're overshooting or talking into the weeds, please let us know, folks. He says, eventually I hope to invest in more DIY rigs, equipment, etc., such as those you talk about in the show. But for now, I'm really excited just to start looking at the sky. Keep up the great work. So I was really interested that, traditionally, I think that people have entered the hobby in a few different ways. Either like me, they kind of started looking at the sky. Maybe they thought they were going to do astrophotography, started down that route, and then realized that they just enjoyed looking at the sky. So I ended up becoming just a visual observer, or maybe they just, naturally became a visual observer or hopped into the astrophotography eventually and really went down that path. But this robotic telescope path is a new path of entry for people, and I think it's really appealing in many ways. What are your thoughts on this, Shane? I think it's super cool.
Well, like the telescope itself is super cool, right? Like it builds, I think it kind of builds a live image for you. The Melon Cams. I don't know if you've ever seen those before, Chris.
Yeah.
So a Melon Cam, you connect it to a telescope, and then you'll have like a monitor, like a small television almost right beside your telescope. And this thing just starts imaging, and it sort of builds the image live on that monitor for you. So it might start off with just, you'll see some stars, and then you might start to see like some faint cloudiness, and then it just keeps building. And all of a sudden you have this bright nebula on the screen, and it's super cool. And I think that these Unistars are sort of similar to that they build this image. But what was really unique, or what I was most interested in, I guess maybe, is the community aspect of this telescope. How, they had this project that kind of went out to these Unistellar owners, and then they all got together on Slack, which is like an instant messaging platform. you know, to sort of talk, communicate, organize, do whatever, and acquire data. This is super cool. Like, this is amazing. These Unistellars are not inexpensive, but knowing now what I know about, you know, the community, I'm far more intrigued by them.
Yeah, and I think, you know, where these maybe differ from, you know, some of the other approaches. Like, if you want to contribute to science or do some stuff, I mean, you can, by being a visual observer, or doing astrophotography. But I think you have to. You've got a pretty big learning curve to get to the point where you can do that, right? Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I would think so. Yeah.
But with these, you know, and I'll read his update here in a second. You know, as a newcomer to astronomy, and really being attracted by that, which is really a more popular thing. Citizen science is a more popular thing than it was, I know, than when we were getting into this, Shane. Mm-hmm. But for somebody who really is attracted to that, it definitely can break down those barriers to actually begin making those contributions super quick.
Yeah, and like imaging exoplanets is just I think it's so cool that amateurs can do that. And I guess maybe we should set the expectations a little bit here. Like, they're not getting an image of a exoplanet like what Jupiter or Mars would look like. Usually what it is they're detecting like a light or a magnitude dip in the star, you know, as the planet transits in front of it. There's other methods too to detect or to, you know, in quotes, image an exoplanet. So the fact that, you know, again, backyard amateurs can do this kind of stuff and contribute is phenomenal. And, you know, I know like Rick Huziak, you know, one of our observing friends, and Vance Petru here in the local Regina Club, they do a ton of variable star measurements and observing, and it's kind of similar, right? Like, they're detecting the magnitude dips, and some of those are due to exoplanets. But yeah, this is really cool.
Yeah. Do you want to read his? Because we had a you know, a brief exchange, and then he sent us an update. I think it was last night or something. Do you want to do you mind reading that?
Yeah. So, hi, Chris and Shane. I just wanted to update you both and share that I completed my first exoplanet transit observation last night and into the wee hours of this morning with my Unistellar telescope. I observed, I think it's Qatar -8B as in Bravo. And then in brackets, he's got TOI 2579.01 transiting its star. So I started observing and recording data at 10 p.m. Pacific Standard Time and continued until 3:45 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. There were several of us from the Unistellar community observing and recording this event from across the country. We were all chatting in Slack before and throughout the event, which made it really fun. I should caveat and say I don't know if I really captured the transit, as it's not technically visible through the scope. We all upload our data, our recording data, and then scientists from different research organizations around the world crunch it all. If it shows that one of us captured the transit, they will then share that data back with us. So fingers crossed. There are dozens of exoplanet and asteroid occultations coming up in the next few weeks. I've added them all to my calendar. So I expect a lot of sleepless nights in my future, but in the best possible way. I'm so amazed by this, Chris. And I'm super motivated to, I don't know if I'll ever buy one of these telescopes, but I'm going to check it out. Yeah. But I'm probably more motivated to just be connected with this community in some way, even if it's just listening to their observations. And I hope, Ethan continues to share this with us, because I'm just fascinated by it.
Yeah, I was really blown away by this. So, I'd sort of heard about and been following these along. I forget when they came out. I think it's been a couple of years anyway, and really curious about them. So this approached them. Now they take some good quality images. They do it sort of automatically. I think they have some filter wheels and some other stuff in them, from what I understand, although I'm not an astrophotographer and have never used one of these pieces of gear. And some of the things that I've seen people attempt to do with them is kind of compare them to like for like astro imaging, like solely astro imaging purposes. Okay. And, maybe try to take a picture of like the horse head and then see how close they can get the robotic telescope to make a similar high quality, high definition photo. And oftentimes somebody with custom gear can make a better photo than what one of these instruments can make, although these instruments are really, really good. But that's sort of what I had seen, and I was just curious about those comparisons. But I hadn't been as aware of this citizen science aspect as much as Ethan has so eloquently explained it to us. And so, yeah, that kind of really struck home. Okay, these things are very, very powerful crowdsourcing science data, conduits. This is just fascinating that people can get these. Now, I don't think they're inexpensive. I haven't looked them up, but I'm guessing they're in and around $4,000 American, although a good astrophotography rig is probably going to start running people that much. And I've seen people spend that much to get up and going in astrophotography. And, the citizen science aspect is certainly, something that people may wish to go down and be attracted to and really want to jump in right away. And so I hadn't really heard of anybody quite doing this before. At least, I wasn't as aware of it maybe as I should have been. So Ethan really kind of peeled back my eyelids when I started reading his email. I was like, what the heck? This is like a whole new cutting edge way for people to get into astronomy. And wow, did I ever appreciate getting this email from him.
Yeah. So echo everything you said, Chris, and I'll just add a little detail. I'm on Unistellar's website. So the eQuinox is $3,000 and
okay.
That is, if you're into imaging, that's a bargain. Because if you if you want a really good mount that tracks well, your camera, your guide scope, your telescope, tripod, all of this stuff, I don't know if you can do anything. I shouldn't say that, the imagers will correct me, I'm sure, but you're probably at least $3,000 US to really come up with a robust rig that can, do some real high quality stuff. So this is certainly not overpriced in any way in my mind. And then if you go to their website, again, if anybody's really interested in this, their menu along the top, it's products, events, citizen science. And then under citizen science, it's asteroids, exoplanets, planetary defense, and ephemeris. There we go. So yeah, there's lots of cool things you can do. This is I just had no idea that this was what these Unistellars did. I was aware of them, and I really just thought it was like a one-stop shop for imagers.
That's what I thought too.
And you just you could just start imaging right away, and it took a lot of the learning curve out of that, and maybe even some of the difficulty of buying all this gear, right? So anyway, this is really cool. I'm so glad that Ethan made us aware of it.
And he didn't detail it here because we had another exchange, and he had sent me a link to his website, or I think it was his Flickr account, sorry. And I think he'd also send me a link to his website, which is amazing, super interesting.
I saw that.
Yeah, super interesting stuff that he's been involved in. But as well, the astro photos that he sent, very cool, considering he just kind of got this and plunked it. I'm curious to know though, Ethan, are you using it from like a balcony? I've spent some time in California myself, have friends there, and I was really curious to know if he was using it on a balcony, or are you using it in a backyard, or are you going out to a dark sky? I was interested to know kind of the sort of the workflow of it, I guess. And then as well, I was interested to note that although he's doing some astro photos, it's more the citizen science, right? And again, that's something I think both you and I hadn't quite realized before. So I thought this was just a really neat entry point. So, I've had friends, if you can believe it, I know I've had friends that are really good astrophotographers, and they they set up their astro gear. They're doing their exposures, and then we go observing together. You've even been one of these people from time to time, Shane, where you'll bring out some lighter equipment, but you'll be doing photos. You'll be going off and doing some photos and then coming back and doing some observing with us. And you might look through our gear a little bit more on those nights. And I know I have other astrophotography friends who sometimes won't bring out anything to look through. They set up their gear and then they're like, all right, what are you looking at? Because I'm, going to be a leech on you for the night, quite literally saying stuff like that. And I could totally see somebody who's doing this, maybe from like a dark sky location, like setting this up to do some citizen science and then doing some observing as well, just because there's somebody who enjoys the night sky. So I thought, wow, that would be really cool. So someone sets up this, they're doing exoplanet stuff, maybe they're doing some NEO work, and then they have their binoculars there and they're kind of, I don't know, looking at open clusters or whatever. I could totally see somebody doing that. So this just is like a whole different avenue of amateur astronomy that I've had my eyes open to this week. So thank you so much, Ethan.
Yeah. Thank you. This is super cool.
All right, cool. Anything to add on this, Shane, before we move on to the next?
Nope. Let's move on.
All right, super. So Joseph was another person who was a Patreon supporter, and he had also written us extensively. So it was just kind of coincidental that we had two Patreon supporters who then had replied with, these extremely detailed programs that they're working on, and so I think you had kind of suggested this, Shane, is to kind of take these and turn them into an episode. And, I was totally there. I hadn't thought of doing that, but I was totally there on this because they had sent so much detail. I think it would have been difficult to just incorporate these two emails into regular episodes. But Joseph writes, do you want me to read this one?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
All right. Joseph writes, said, because we were corresponding, but he wrote, "Dear Chris, I think a newsletter would be cool." So he had made the suggestion maybe we would have a newsletter. And I had actually volunteered you, Shane, because you have newsletter experience.
I saw that. Appreciate it.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see about a newsletter. I think that's an interesting idea.
It's interesting. I just would have to stop sleeping, I think, to find the time. So.
Yeah, but there's different things we can do. I think because he kind of detailed out some other stuff, and I think maybe there's some things that we can work on from that perspective. However, I understand that managing a podcast and responding to your listeners can be a lot of work, top of your jobs and your personal life. Yeah, that's true. Love doing it though. Often what I do is read the emails right before I have my lunch every day. So people are like, why is this person responding in the middle of the day? And I find that really, really a lot of fun, or after dinner or something. If it's feasible to release one every now and again, perhaps a monthly or bi-monthly, definitely be interested. That's cool. One thing I do though, is I write for the Journal of the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada. And it's just something I do for fun. And it comes out every other month. I have an article in there. And actually in the April edition, Shane and I will have an article we collaborated on about the podcast. It's going to be in there. So we do produce regular things. And then I also am the editor for the RASC Observers Calendar. And I'm also a contributor to the RASC Observers Handbook. So there are a few ways you can kind of get material for us on a somewhat regular basis. Okay. He goes on to say, I generally don't read newsletters. In fact, the only one I actually read on a regular basis is the Rose City Astronomy Club newsletter. I am familiar with that newsletter. That is a good newsletter. I've read it a few times. Nevertheless, I would enjoy getting a newsletter from you and Shane, and I'd really love to see other listeners' sketches, photographs, and observation logs. So I like that idea. So I think that's one thing we could probably work on as we go forward into the future, is bringing together the other listeners' sketches, photos, and observing logs, because we really have an amazing group of listeners that have a variety of expertise that like no one individual could ever possibly have. And so I think it would be cool to bring those together somehow. So yeah, hopefully we can work on that.
Yeah, it would be neat what we need is I don't know, a third person that designs and builds things like this for us.
Exactly. we would need more Patreon supporters to afford that person. Okay.
Yeah, to have staff.
Yeah, it would be cool. Like we do have a website. It would be cool to be able to have like components of the website and to maybe build it in there. Anyway, he goes on to say, in regards to sketches, I have included some attached to this email. I currently just use white paper and regular graphite pencils. But I also like to take a case out of mechanical pencil lead. I use these to draw nebula and deep sky objects where light is scattered over a large area. My current technique with these is just to break off a small piece of lead and rub the paper gently while I'm looking at the object. It's easier for me to observe the object through my telescope and simultaneously trace the perimeter of the object with the pencil lead between my finger and the paper. I'd never heard of that before.
Yeah, that's a very interesting technique. It makes sense. I would have never thought of that.
Yeah, that is super cool. You can see this technique in my sketch of Messier 45, and he's attached that. I put it down below if you want to take a look. And when I first saw this sketch, I thought it was a photograph.
Like, I know, it's incredible.
Black and white photograph.
Yeah. It's really nice.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you so much for including that. Thought it was super cool. And he said, I'm planning on trying this technique again this Friday as I'm planning to observe and sketch Messier 51. Please send that sketch. I remember either you or Shane suggesting using black paper and white oil pastels during the episode with Mike Rector. Yeah, it was Mike who made. Mike is somebody who's using those. I've tried unsuccessfully, so I'm going to try to ramp up for the summer and get set up to do those because Mike kind of detailed it out. I think I was missing a couple techniques. So the one thing Mike had talked about was not sharpening the pencils as sharp as I was going and then just kind of refining them on the sandpaper. And I think that I had goofed up on my sharpening. I'm not an artist. So Mike kind of, I think, is getting me over a little bit of a hump there. Can't wait to try it out. Joseph goes on to say, personally, if I did make the switch, I think I would opt for white gel pens of varying sizes to get solid star points, then perhaps use white colored pencils to deduce clouds, nebula, dust, etc. I have limited experience with oil pastels, but it does not seem like the most intuitive choice for astronomical sketching, though I'm willing to give it a shot. If either of you think it's worth a try. So I have to say this, that it seems like Joseph has some sort of background in doing this stuff or has given it a lot of thought. And I think, Joseph, you should do it the way you think you should do it, because that sketch of M45 is done in a way that I've never heard of before. And I don't have that much of a background in sketching, and my sketches are okay. But I think that you should try it the way you think you should do it, and then show us the results and then go from there. Yeah. What do you think, Shane?
Yeah, I think that's awesome. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, because I would just be curious to see what you come up with, because I think you're kind of going down some really spectacular paths there, and would just encourage you to just keep going in the way that you think you should go in, and don't necessarily take anything that I say about sketching or anybody else says for the only way to do it or the right way to do it or anything. It really is like an art form, and I just think that sketch of M45 was just so beautiful that whatever you think will create similar or comfortable sketching experiences for you. Do that, and then see how it goes, and let us know, and let me know, because I was also curious, sort of on my flip side, doing black ink on white paper. I'd actually migrated to using they're not gel pens, but what they are Manga artistic pens.
Oh, so interesting.
Yeah. So anyway,
is Manga a brand, or is that like a category?
Manga is an art form. I'm using these Faber Manga pens. They're just called a Faber-Castell Pitt Artist Pen. Doesn't say it's a Manga pen on it, but it came as a Manga pen in a Manga pen case. So Manga is like a almost like an artistic caricature type of drawing.
It's used largely in like anime, I believe.
Yeah. which I don't know very much about, clearly. But I thought the pens looked pretty good, and they were on sale, so I picked them up, and I've been using those just for some of my sketches. So I've tried a similar thing that you're describing, but for black on white. So I'd be curious to see how you make with the white on black. I think that's pretty cool. Let's see. Just trying to find my space here. He mentioned something about a bino viewer. But do they provide a clearer, more detailed image? I'm thinking of getting a bino viewer myself. However, I have several pairs of nice binoculars. I also been looking into equatorial mounts for one of these binoculars. What's your opinion? Oh, so that might be why I didn't reply, because Shane, that's more your wheelhouse. So do you want to kind of work through his questions on the bino viewer?
Yeah, well, you faded out there. I completely lost you, so I'm not 100% sure where.
Do you see his questions on the bino viewers?
I'm just looking here.
Here, I can just read them off. So, do you need two of the same eyepiece to use the bino viewer?
Yeah, you do. Yeah, for sure. Like you know, the 24 millimeter panoptic that I reference, I have two of those. If you mismatch your eyepieces, you'll likely have different focal points. You'll probably, so you'll never have, I shouldn't say never, but it might be very difficult to have two different eyepieces focused at the same time. And then you may also have issues merging the images. That's one of the bigger challenges with a bino viewer is some people struggle to merge the image so that you're not seeing doubles. And if you're not using two matched eyepieces, then you're going to struggle. So that is probably one of the barriers to entry, I think, with bino viewers, is that you got to double up your eyepieces. And one way you can get around that is Dankmeyer and maybe Earth Wind. I'm not too sure. They make a thing called a power switch. So this goes on the bottom of your bino viewer, and it basically it has like a reducer and like a Barlow lens in it, and you slide it in and out of the focal plane. And what it does is, there's like three settings. So one setting is just your eyepieces natively in there. Then one will reduce the focal length so that it's a lower power, wider field view. And then the other one increases, so it's like a Barlow, it'll increase the power, and it saves you then from having to buy, a bunch of eyepieces. So you buy one set of eyepieces, say two 24 millimeter panoptics. And then the power switch effectively makes it like you have, three different focal lengths of eyepieces. So it's kind of a little bit more of an economical way to approach it. And it also saves you then the hassle of switching eyepieces in and out. Cool.
That sounds really, really good. Let's see. What else do we got here? I lost my, I was trying to take a look at my Zoom settings here because I did have some challenges. Yeah, he goes on to say, in regards to antique astronomy books, we had mentioned some antique astronomy books and manuscripts. He's included one as an attachment. Doesn't have a physical copy of the book, hasn't been able to find one, but the PDF was provided through the Rose City Astronomer. So thank you so much for sending that. He believes he obtained it from the University of California Library website. It's an interesting read, understanding a wonderful photo of the Pleiades. Just trying to get through here. He talks about the Astronomical Scrapbook, Skywatchers, Pioneers, and Seekers of Astronomy by Joseph Ashbrook. I have that book. That's a great book. Much newer book, 1984. Not quite an antique yet. It's a funny and casual series of essays from oddities. Yeah, my copy is like a preprint copy. I've not the first edition. It's the pre-first edition. So there's some like weird things with it. A friend bought it for me, found it somewhere and sent it. I think they go for $20 online. I realized I have both the books you mentioned, Celestial Objects for Common Telescopes by T.W. Webb, but I haven't read them yet. So I think he would have really enjoyed those Celestial Objects for Common Telescopes by Webb. I'll have to set out some time tomorrow and take the scopes out on Friday night. Then he goes on to say, now in regards to the field of view calculator, so he's creating a field of view calculator.
Yeah, this is cool.
And then let's see. So he's created a field of view calculator and he's working on a widget. I think I made a recommendation to maybe take a look at a different calculation, but it gets pretty close, I think, with what he's doing. And he talks about how Cloudy Nights has compiled a list of field stop, or he was asking if Cloudy Nights has compiled a list of field stop diameters. They have. It's actually a sticky in the eyepiece forum. So if you go to the eyepiece forum, there's actually an Excel spreadsheet that gets updated frequently that you can download. So as people buy eyepieces, they make these measurements. It doesn't have every eyepiece on there, but it's probably got like 3/4 of the eyepieces that are out there. So what would be cool, because he was asking for like any of our suggestions or recommendations, and this is one thing that sort of is something I've been looking for, is if you could have a widget that would somehow generate those field of views. So what you would do is just put the focal length of your telescope in, and then maybe select the eyepiece somehow, and then it would give you the field of view. And traditionally, that's not how these field of view calculators work. Typically, the field of view calculators work by they take the apparent field of view and divide it by the magnification, which gets close within like 1/4 of a degree or something like that. But anyway, he had just sort of asked for a suggestion. I think it's really cool that he's made one of these field of view calculators. But if somebody was sort of looking to step that up a notch and actually give an accurate one, I think that would be pretty cool. Maybe those already exist. I just wasn't aware, and I just kind of do my own calculation. And that calculation to get the most accurate field of view is to take the field stop diameter divided by the focal length of the telescope and multiply by, I think it's radian, which is 57.3. And that will give you the actual field of view for the telescope. And it's something that I really get into. Some other people get into. A lot of people just don't care. They just know they're going to get so much magnification, and they want a certain field of view, and as wide as possible is often the case. So they're going to get 100-degree eyepiece or something. All right. Mm-hmm. Let's see. Lastly, to answer your location question, he lives in Oregon, and he says that he has some access to some darker skies. I think it sounds like in the summer. And let's just see, going through this just to see, I think his wife has done some astronomy too. I just don't want to go too down the rabbit hole because we're getting short on time. He said, that's all for now. I really appreciate how much effort you guys put into the podcast. It's my favorite podcast to listen to. Well, thank you so much. Really appreciate that. And I always learn something new while I listen. Well, this time, half of it is your email to us. So we really appreciate we learned quite a bit from you in this one as well, Joseph. And I know we're kind of getting short on time, but maybe I'll just see, Shane, if you have anything left to add on Joseph's email, and then we can wrap up.
Yeah, just one thing. The thing you referenced on Cloudy Nights, the spreadsheet, it's the 2021 Eyepiece Buyer's Guide. So if you go into that pinned thread at the top of the forum, there's a spreadsheet from the first post, and it has field stop and all other data points that you can think of with eyepieces. It's a real handy resource, and I've used it quite a few times.
Cool. Just before we duck out, I'm going to send a thanks to Jim, who sent me astro image of the Seagull Nebula. I had it in the notes for the previous show, but I don't know why. I think it might be the internet today having some like sound cutting in. No, Shane's noticing it on my end. I'm noticing a little bit on his end. And then I even switched computers and everything, and it hasn't done anything. I've switched computers, microphones, tried everything I can here, and it's not changing it. So it's got to be something external to my setup. So thanks so much, Jim, for sending that. Really appreciate the Seagull Nebula image that you sent in the details. Again, that would be a great thing for us to have in some sort of online format so that other people can enjoy it as well. And then Felipe from Brazil had sent me this really cool update on he's built a go-to system for his telescope. He's got it working. He's got right ascension and azimuth drives on it. And he also wrapped his 166 millimeter Dobsonian in carbon fiber. I think it looks super cool. And thanks so much for sending those along, Felipe. So anything to add to this one, Shane, before we put it in the can?
Nope, nothing to add.
All right, super. Well, thanks, Shane, and thanks so much to everybody for listening. Sorry if we did have some sound troubles today. I don't know. Maybe I got to get I have a wire that runs into this office. I might have to try to actually hook it up again. All right, so we'll talk to you soon, and thanks again. Bye-bye.
Thank you everyone for listening, and we hope you enjoyed the show. If you are interested in more information, would like to contact us, or if you would like to support the podcast, check out our website, actualastronomy.com.